Discover the amazing transformation of this grandma, a touching tale of overcoming trauma. Ruth stood at her kitchen counter, an empty pie crust waiting to be filled, yet her heart felt heavy and cluttered. The sparkling illusion of her smiling exterior hid the churning mess inside. Each day, she made apple pies, but the sweet aroma no longer brought her joy, it echoed the loneliness that crept in since her husband passed. In the tiny town of Willow Creek, Ruth was known for her warmth and comforting hugs, but as she gazed at her granddaughter Sarah, crushed under the weight of student debt and a job that stifled her spirit, the helplessness returned, wrapping around Ruth like an oppressive fog. She remembered the ache of losing Samuel, how it had felt to be cast adrift, and now she felt that same vulnerability for Sarah. As the sun dipped low, casting shadows that danced villainously on her floral wallpaper, Ruth's solace was her garden, a sanctuary filled with fragrant blooms. Her paintbrush lay untouched, a distant echo of a vibrant dream of painting that had slipped through her fingers. She had once envisioned herself as an artist, yet plucked that dream away like an unwieldy weed in her youthful exuberance. Now it felt as if that path was buried beneath layers of stifled expression, a relic of a life unfulfilled. One rainy afternoon, she ventured into the attic, a maze of memories piled high in dust. A box caught her eye, and within it, her heartbeat quickened as she unearthed forgotten paintings, letters that revealed a truer self, and a journal filled with her secrets and fears. The discovery felt like a dormant fire igniting deep within her, flickering against the descent of despair. But alongside that flicker danced the daunting shadows of doubt. Even after decades of nurturing others, could she truly reclaim the artist she once dreamed of being? This resurrection of her aspirations filled her with a newfound determination, yet doubts began to swell within her, a network of whispers from her neighbors creeping into her from every direction. Why would a woman her age think she could still be an artist, they murmured. Isn't it too late for her? Each comment weighed her down, igniting feelings of shame and urgency. Ruth hesitated, wanted to reclaim her identity, but every step on the path forward felt sharp, burdened by the expectations of her age. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she picked up her brush, her heart raced with anticipation. Each stroke held a fragment of her past, but with every stroke came a flurry of questions. Was she foolish to hope for recognition at her age? Could this spark she felt truly become a roaring flame, or would it flicker out, confirming every doubt she ever harbored about her worth? Just as courage began to take root in her soul, a familiar voice called out from the crowd at the local gallery where she would display her work. What gives you the right to redefine yourself now? The words hung in the air, a suffocating shroud of intimidation and fear that made her heart thud painfully, forcing her to confront, not just the community that nurtured her, but the very essence of who she believed she was. What if her legacy turned out to be a mockery of her dreams? Would she crumble under scrutiny, or could she stand tall? As uncertainty loomed like an impending storm, she was on the precipice of something monumental, and every instinct screamed for an answer. Ruth's fingers trembled as they held the brush, the soft bristles gliding across the canvas with an unfamiliar grace. It felt rejuvenating yet terrifying, like standing on the edge of a diving board, peering into an abyss of unknown waters below. With each stroke, the colors began to merge into an abstract array, a reflection of her emotions. The vibrancy of hope clashed with the murky shadows of doubt. She panted, grappling with the intensity of her feelings, slowly unraveling the entangled threads of her past while desperately crafting a new narrative. She found herself confronted not just by those doubts, but by memories glaring fiercely from the recesses of her mind, the joyous laughter shared with Samuel over a canvas, the tender conversations about dreams unspoken, and the stalwart belief he had in her artistic spirit. Would she allow fear to extinguish what he so fervently believed in? Stop! The piercing voice echoed in her mind, the judgmental whispers of her neighbors swiftly rising once more. What if they were right? Ruth shook her head, brushing off the overwhelming despondence that threatened to pull her back into a dark void. She took a deep breath as if gathering the very courage her husband had always encouraged her to summon. The moment of reckoning approached, she couldn't keep dwelling in unfulfilled potential. Looking at her half-finished painting, she realized it wasn't just an act of creation, but a visceral confrontation with her identity. Every flick of the brush was a tiny rebellion against the brackets society had confined her within, a declaration of her existence apart from the roles she had played: wife, mother, grandmother. Ruth was more than these labels. She was an artist, an individual with thoughts, feelings, dreams, and ambitions that deserved to breathe. Despite the welling anxiety, a spark ignited deep within her, urging her forward. She summoned memories of long-forgotten critiques of art show feedback, passionate discussions with Samuel about artistic expression, and her youthful, unyielding ambitions. Those memories became her lifeline, pulling her closer to reclaiming her authentic self. With renewed focus, Ruth decided to own and defend her art. She began jotting down her reflections in her journal, wrestling with the critiques she anticipated hearing and countering them with affirmations of her value and artistic vision. These pages became a sanctuary for her thoughts, evolving into a guide for her creative journey, revealing depths of emotion she hadn't yet explored. Yet at night, the shadows crept back, each one whispering the harsh truths she always avoided. Questions gnawed at her. Was it truly her calling? Did she dare believe she could inspire others, that she still had the right to hold a brush? Some nights, she would sit in her yard, staring longingly at the garden she cultivated with care, and feel the weight of unworthiness. But Ruth hadn't allowed despair to overshadow her spirit. She sought solace in her art more than ever, each hour spent holding the brush granting her salvation from the oppressive weight of societal expectations. Then came a decision: she would step beyond her protective walls. At the following community meeting for local artists, Ruth resolved to share not just her paintings but her story. Excitement and fear intertwined within her as she envisioned her words echoing in that gallery. As the meeting day approached, she felt a swell of anticipation and anxiety. Clenching her brush tightly, a thought loomed larger than the rest: what if they could see her heart through her work? But as she prepared to unveil her creations and her journey, a tension built inside her, one she knew would either ignite her path or shatter her resolve. Would her art find a voice in the cacophony of judgment, or would it be silenced by the echo of doubt? The moment of truth was approaching, and Ruth was about to confront not just the town's perception but also the reflection of herself she feared most. Would she rise to embrace her dreams, or would she succumb to the familiar shadows? Ruth's heart raced as she stepped into the gallery, the scent of oil paint and fresh canvases all too familiar yet startlingly foreign. This was the crucible of her trials, the place where her identity would be laid bare. Not simply as a participant but as a creator, she prepared to share not just her artworks but the emotional landscapes that accompanied each brushstroke. The space buzzed with anticipation, murmurs dancing around her like the electricity in the air before a storm. She felt exposed, every gaze prying into her soul, every whisper dissecting her purpose. Holding her breath, she stared at her painting once more, the vibrant chaos echoing her heart's turmoil. This wasn't merely art, it was a manifestation of her journey to reclaim herself. When it was time to speak, Ruth's legs trembled as she approached the small podium. She glanced around, locking eyes with a few familiar faces but quickly breaking contact. Each one bore the weight of her insecurities, judgment drenching their presence. Yet, buried beneath the apprehension, a flicker of resolve flickered. This was her moment. Thank you for being here, she began, her voice shaking but growing steadier with each word. When I paint, I confront the shadows. Not just on canvas but in my life. Her voice braved the silence, plunging into a cavernous depths of honesty she had avoided exposing for too long. As she spoke, she remembered Samuel's unwavering faith in her and felt his spirit wrapping around her like a protective embrace. I've spent years hiding. My identity was wrapped up in the roles I played for everyone else. Each confession steered her deeper into vulnerability, unearthing the warmth of her truth. After losing my husband, I became lost. Yet, art called to me, awakening parts of me I thought had withered away. Her heart pounded, echoing loudly in the stillness. It's terrifying to share this because of the fear that chases me. What if my work isn't good enough? What if people judge me harshly? The weight of her questions bore down on her, yet she understood that this was also part of her story, the struggle against self-doubt. But I'm learning that my art is more than skill. It's the reflection of my journey, my pain, my joy, and my hope. As she finished her explanation, Ruth felt the release of pent-up tension. The nervous energy turned into something tangible, it flowed through her, awakening a part of her she hadn't realized existed. Audience members shifted, their faces unreadable. She noticed one woman in the corner nodding, a small smile unfurling, and it surged a wave of confidence through Ruth. This was no longer just about confronting judgment, it was about affirming her right to create. Each eye that turned toward her pulsed with possibility. It wasn't just admiration she craved but a shared acknowledgement of the struggle each person faces in carving out their space in the world. With that realization, she stepped off the podium, her soul alight with an unfamiliar fire. The encounter felt transformative, like crossing a threshold into a new realm of identity. The whispers of doubt that had loomed began to dissipate, replaced by echoes of hope that perhaps she could inspire others. But as she mingled with the crowd, exchanging tentative words and glances, she sensed a lingering presence. A figure loomed at the edge of the room, someone she had hoped wouldn't attend. The judgment she had fought so fiercely began to claw back into her mind, dripping with the anticipation of criticism. Who was this person? What would they say? Ruth steeled herself. The moment had arrived for a confrontation she had long avoided. Would she stand her ground or crumble under the weight of their scrutiny? Ruth inhaled sharply, her eyes narrowing on the figure that lurked just beyond the circle of warm conversation and laughter. It was her former art instructor, Evelyn, a stark reminder of her past doubts and unfulfilled dreams. Ruth had admired Evelyn's work but had often felt dwarfed by the woman's fierce talent and critical eye. The thrill of sharing her art had begun to sour, replaced by the taste of trepidation. What if Evelyn found her efforts lacking? The weight of the past settled heavily on Ruth's shoulders, darker than the paintbrushes she had wielded fiercely earlier. Just the sight of Evelyn sent jolts of self-doubt slicing through her newfound confidence. She took a step back, fighting the instinct to retreat. This was her moment, the very space she had carved out when she dared to step onto the podium. She remembered the heaviness of her silence in class, the way each critique from Evelyn had felt like a judgment not just on her art, but on her very being. Ruth pushed her focus inward, steadying herself against the wave of anxiety rising again. Breathe, she whispered to herself. You've come too far to let her define you. With renewed determination, she adjusted her stance and approached the older woman at the periphery. Evelyn's piercing gaze locked onto her, a knowing smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Ruth felt exposed, but she fought to rise above it. Ruth, Evelyn said, her tone neutral, though Ruth could detect an underlying condescension. I was surprised to see you here showcasing your work. The woman's words hung between them, pregnant with judgment. Ruth fought against the suffocating impulse to wither under the scrutiny. Instead, she cleared her throat, finding the right words amidst her swirling thoughts. I've worked hard on these pieces, Ruth asserted, a steadiness echoing in her voice. They represent my journey, not just as an artist, but as a person reclaiming her life. The world around them seemed to fade into the background, and for a moment, it felt like just the two of them were suspended in time. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her lips pursed. Interesting, she remarked with thinly veiled skepticism. Art should provoke, yes, but it should also be refined. I hope you're willing to craft more if you wish to truly express yourself. The implication was clear. Beyond the vulnerability of sharing her art, Evelyn's words challenged the very essence of Ruth's self-discovery. In that instant, Ruth felt a bubbling anger mixed with a renewed sense of purpose. Evelyn's thinly veiled contempt only fueled her resolve to shatter the shackles of her old identity. Rather than retreating into a defensive posture, Ruth found herself confronting the silent narrative woven into her past relationships. Thank you for your honesty, Evelyn. I understand your perspective, but I'm on a different path now. This journey has taught me that my voice matters. Rawness has its own kind of beauty. Caught off guard, Evelyn's expression momentarily faltered, revealing a hint of surprise. This was new territory. Ruth had not only acknowledged her past but had dared to define herself on her own terms. Ruth stood taller, realizing that this moment was about more than an old instructor's approval. It was about the metamorphosis she had undergone, the liberation that came from embracing her flaws and triumphs alike. As the exchange lingered in the air, a small group of onlookers began to gather. Their whispers and sidelong glances felt invasive, but Ruth held her ground. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she found herself wanting to inspire those watching. Each breath deepened her awareness and connection to her own truth, transforming fear into a form of empowerment that was as authentic as the colors on her canvas. But just as she turned to continue mingling, she caught sight of Evelyn's fleeting smirk, a challenge veiled beneath her composed exterior. The moment of truth pushed Ruth into a decision. She could either engage and dismantle the shadow of doubt or let it loom over her anew. The risk felt tangible, but for the first time, she found herself wanting to lean in, to embrace the discomfort, to grow even more. What lay ahead would demand every ounce of courage she possessed. What if she could transform that challenge into a powerful dialogue? Could she shift the narrative from one of criticism to one of understanding? Ruth stepped closer to the radiant crowd again, her pulse quickening at the thought of finding her footing amid judgment. There was more at stake than her confrontation with Evelyn. This was about claiming her space as an artist and as a woman reborn. Would she be bold enough to face not only her insecurities but the very woman who had, for so long, defined those insecurities? Ruth felt the atmosphere crackle around her, the helplessness she had once known grappling with a burgeoning strength. With each rhythmic beat of her heart, she headed back toward Evelyn, the woman who had haunted her artistic journey for far too long. The murmurs of the crowd faded into a muted background hum. Ruth could distinctly hear the pulse of her own resolve echoing in her ears. Evelyn, she said, her voice firm yet steady, attempting to break through the veneer of uncertainty that had plagued her for years. I want to know what you really think. If my work isn't refined enough, tell me precisely what needs changing. Critique me honestly. There were no defensive walls left to erect, her vulnerability became her shield. Evelyn, taken aback, studied Ruth with a mixture of surprise and mild amusement. You really want my opinion? Her tone carried a hint of mockery, but Ruth could hear the sliver of curiosity beneath it. Yes, Ruth pressed, digging deeper into the wellspring of her newfound courage. I want to grow not just as an artist but as a person. If I'm to continue on this path, I need to understand how I can improve while holding on to what makes my work mine. That moment transformed the dynamic between them. Ruth's challenge wasn't met with anger, instead, a flicker of intrigue blossomed in Evelyn's sharp gaze. Very well, she finally said, crossing her arms and sizing Ruth up. Let us see if your art can withstand scrutiny. As Ruth internalized Evelyn's words, fear flickered within her heart, but she felt a remarkable resilience balancing it out. Seeing Evelyn value her opinion was a radical shift. Perhaps this was a chance to reclaim her voice not merely as an artist weaving colors on canvas, but as a woman solidifying her identity. The two engaged in an exchange that went beyond critique, traversing the territory of genuine artistry. Evelyn pointed out aspects in Ruth's work that radiated authenticity, the raw edges that Ruth had feared were flaws, and instead highlighted them as strengths. Their conversation transformed as warmth supplanted scorn, and Ruth felt that creative flame reignite within her. "You have a unique voice," Evelyn finally conceded, her customary coolness receding. "Learning refinement is valuable, but so is embracing imperfection. Just don't lose what makes you, you." With those words, the weight of years of self-doubt began to lift. They stood together, two artists in a quiet confrontation, yet somehow entwined by a shared understanding of the struggles they faced in their artistic pursuits. Ruth looked around at the spectators, who had been captivated by their dialogue, her newfound confidence aglow in the admiration shimmering in their eyes. She felt every fear she had ever harbored dissolve, replaced by something rawer and more powerful, the realization that she could freely embrace her journey, not as a destination, but as a beautiful process filled with challenges and triumphs. As she stepped back from Evelyn, a lingering sense of possibility propelled her forward. The tension in her chest transformed into exhilaration. This was not merely about asserting herself but redefining her path with every brushstroke she would create. Yet, just as Ruth began to bask in the allure of victory, Evelyn's enigmatic smile returned. "Keep pushing, Ruth," she murmured cryptically. "You haven't faced your greatest challenge yet." The weight of those words settled heavily on Ruth's shoulders. Her journey had just begun, and the thrill of uncertainty beckoned her anew, a challenge she now felt ready to embrace. What awaited her around the corner would require not just artistic evolution, but a confrontation with the deepest vaults of her self-identity. Would she dare to delve even further into her history, facing the ghost that still lingered? As Ruth left the air of confrontation behind, she could feel the ignited spark of ambition within her flickering brightly, yet its glow illuminated the path ahead with shadows that danced beyond her reach. What had started as an internal battle had expanded into a canvas of external expectations, her own doubts mingled with new possibilities. An overwhelming sensation of urgency washed over her, to explore that unexplored territory, the depths that had shaped her. She would need to dig carefully through layers of her past. That night, unable to shake Evelyn's final words from her mind, Ruth sat cross-legged on her living room floor surrounded by empty canvases and half-used tubes of paint. The evening light, filtered through drawn curtains, crept in softly, casting stripes across her clutter. Her hand hovered over a blank canvas strewn with paint splatters, a reflection of both chaos and inspiration. She yearned to begin, yet her brush remained suspended in uncertainty. Confronting the ghosts of her past was no simple task. Names and faces flitted through her memory like shadows caught just beyond reach. Memories of childhood not filled with vibrant colors but muted grays, weighed down by expectations and silent critiques, plagued her thoughts. Their presence stirred a visceral fear. How would she excavate those wounds only to leave them exposed? In her mind, she weighed the risk of delving into an uncertain past against the potential of healing through creation. Would transforming her pain into art allow her to reclaim her narrative, or would it simply conjure the very doubts she sought to escape? These thoughts ricocheted within her like oscillating echoes, challenging her resolve at every turn. Fueled by an impulsive wave of determination, Ruth gripped her brush as if it were a lifeline. Each stroke she laid down became a testament to her struggle, a visually tangible expression of everything she had tried to suppress. The colors leaped off the canvas, vibrant and ferocious, yet intertwined with shades of sorrow. As layers built upon one another, she discovered a rhythm, intense bursts of creativity entwined with moments of stillness where she simply observed her thoughts. Ruth unearthed memories that flared with emotion, allowing brush strokes to translate whispers into tangible forms, swirling them into a mosaic of her experience. She confronted the uptight demands of her childhood, the artistic dismissiveness that had clouded her self-image. This process was cathartic, bursting free from a long-held silence. With each layer she painted, she felt a gushing release of clarity. Yet, amidst the exhilaration of creating, a creeping fear gnawed at her edges. What if this exploration did not yield the liberation she craved? What if it only uncovered wounds that were rawer than before? Voices echoed with every turn of her brush, a sinister reminder that vulnerability could be both powerful and perilous. She faced the very doubt she had fought against, the one that whispered questions about her worth and abilities, hoping to snuff out her flame. But even as those fears loomed ominously, Ruth sensed a shift, a growing resilience, a burgeoning identity clashing with expectancy. She thought back to her exchange with Evelyn and remembered, vividly, the permission to embrace imperfection, to carve out her identity through her art, however messy it might be. Each challenge would sharpen her vision and amplify her voice. She could not shy away from that promise. As she stepped away from the canvas, drenched in the colors of both her past and triumph, a deeper understanding began to blossom. This journey of self-discovery was not just about confronting wounds, it was about claiming her narrative, leading her toward uncharted horizons. The flicker of that urgency, now blazing brightly, urged her forward. What she had just begun to unveil was the beginning of a transformative arc, one rife with potential yet shadowed by uncertainty. Gripping the finished piece, Ruth felt a newfound conviction that the true challenge lay ahead, not just in confronting her past but also in stepping boldly into her future, where her greatest trials awaited. Would she have the courage to embrace the next pivotal challenge? Ruth awoke the next morning enveloped in a sense of unexpected clarity. The chaos of the night before lingered but had transformed into a quiet determination. She knew intuitively that her recent artistic endeavor had unearthed more than just pain, it had sparked a sense of purpose. The vibrant strokes across her canvas urged her to reflect, not just on her past, but on the path she would carve forward. With her morning coffee warming her hands, she sat in her small nook that overlooked the bustling street below. Each car that rushed by seemed like a reminder of the frenetic pace of life outside her self-imposed cocoon. Ruth realized that to truly embrace this burgeoning sense of self, she needed to engage beyond her solitary space. Her ambition was beckoning her to translate that internal fire into action. After a moment's contemplation, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. The names sparkled like distant stars, some reminded her of supportive allies, while others evoked the familiar pang of doubt, the naysayers whose voices still echoed in her mind. Yet she found herself gravitating toward Evelyn, propelled by the memory of their last conversation. They shared a bond that felt both enlightening and compelling. Stepping into that connection felt like stepping closer to both her past and her solution. "Let us meet up today," she typed nervously, pressing send before her self-doubt could intervene. As she awaited a reply, an ardent thought took root. She needed to connect, to brainstorm ideas, to map out her next steps with someone who understood her journey and could challenge her perspective. When Evelyn's enthusiastic text pinged back almost instantaneously, Ruth's heart fluttered. They arranged to meet at a cafe not far from her apartment, a place known for its eclectic vibe and local art display. The thought of being surrounded by creativity sparked her excitement as she contemplated how her art could intertwine with her voice. Dressed and determined, she arrived at the airy cafe adorned with bright colors and lively chatter. Each step toward their table felt heavier than the last, the familiar anxiety creeping back. Could she communicate the depths of her transformation? Would Evelyn appreciate the exploration she had undergone, or would it serve as another reminder of inadequacy? The moment she settled into the chair, Evelyn's bright smile eased her tension. They exchanged pleasantries, but Ruth sensed a shift in their typical dynamic. She had initiated the meeting with intent, and it felt as if a call to arms had been issued. She was ready to confront her insecurities head-on, even if only through conversation. As they began to share stories, Ruth felt momentum building within her. She spoke candidly about her recent artistic venture, about digging deep into her past, both the beautiful memories and those that left scars. As she wove her narrative, she noticed the way Evelyn's expression shifted from interest to profound understanding, a rare spark igniting in her eyes. Art is an incredible way to channel your innermost truths, Evelyn mused, her voice imbued with the weight of experience. But it's also an opportunity to build bridges with others. Have you thought about showcasing your journey? The suggestion sent a ripple of exhilaration through Ruth, yet a steep hill of apprehension rose before her. A showcase. To stand in a space where others might dissect her heart as vulnerabilities. She dared not utter her hesitation but could feel it gripping her. Showcase. She echoed, the word tangling on her tongue. What might that look like? Yes. A gallery exhibit. Maybe even a live painting session where people can experience your process, Evelyn encouraged, her eyes sparkling with inspiration. Let them see the intricacies of your journey and what it means to overcome trauma through creativity. As that idea took root in her mind, a wave of fear surged. The thought of sharing not just the art, but the story behind it, her untouched pain and hard-fought progress, was almost paralyzing. Yet, as she weighed Evelyn's words, Ruth began to recognize the duality of the challenge. This was not merely about the risk of rejection, it was also a chance to forge connections, to instigate dialogue, and perhaps, to inspire others to confront their own narratives as well. Her heart raced, caught in the powerful push and pull of opportunity and fear. Drawing a deep breath, she wondered, would standing in front of a crowd, bearing her soul through the lens of her paintings, help solidify her identity? Or might she retreat back to the shadows, uncertain and guarded? One thing was abundantly clear, clarifying her journey meant sharing it, and the time had come to face the fear that lingered like a shadow. A new adventure loomed, ripe with potential and fraught with uncertainty, pushing her to rise beyond the confines of her self-doubt. Ruth felt a determined fire ignite within. Embracing a showcase could serve as the crucible for her transformation, a decisive step towards solidifying not just her art, but her identity too. So much could hinge on this bold leap. All right, she declared, her voice steadying, let us explore this idea further. As the conversation flowed, Ruth could feel the flicker within igniting into a blaze, pushing her toward the next defining challenge. But in the back of her mind, a question lingered. Was she truly ready to expose her very core and risk vulnerability, or would this opportunity transform into yet another fear to confront? Her journey had only just begun. The fire within beckoned her forward, but now she had to confront the flames that burned around her. Sitting in that lively cafe, Ruth felt the narrow space between doubt and determination begin to close. The vibrant environment around her mirrored the tumult of emotions within. With each sip of her coffee, she grappled with the idea of showcasing her art, a concept that had both thrilled and terrified her. What if the unveiling of her work turned into yet another episode of ridicule and misunderstanding? She shook her head, dispelling the negative thoughts that threatened to surface. This time, she would not let fear dictate her choices. Evelyn leaned in, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Have you thought about the themes you want to convey? Ruth hesitated, mind racing through a barrage of fragmented memories. I want to express resilience, the beauty in chaos, and how it intersects with healing. The words came more easily than she expected, a reflection of the introspection she had undertaken in her recent journey. Seeing Evelyn's encouraging nod, she ventured deeper into her thoughts. What about a series of pieces? Ruth continued, her confidence solidifying with each sentence. One for each stage of my transformation. From doubt to fear, to acceptance and finally empowerment. As she spoke, A vision began to crystallize in her mind, a gallery filled with colors and textures that depicted her struggles and victories. Each piece would serve as a stepping stone, inviting viewers into her world, urging them to confront their own narratives. Evelyn's excitement matched Ruth's emerging clarity. This could resonate with so many people. It's not just about your art, it's about sharing a story of overcoming. Ruth felt a flicker of apprehension but pushed it down. The potential of what lay ahead overshadowed her urge to retreat. She needed a plan not merely to display art, but to create an experience that invited others to reflect on their journeys. "Let us brainstorm," Ruth proposed, her heart racing at the thought of taking this step. "What do I need to do first?" From that point on, the conversation transformed into a purposeful exchange. They discussed logistics, the practicalities of renting space, the kind of materials Ruth wanted to use, and how to promote the event. Each detail felt like a new brushstroke on a canvas that had been waiting for this moment. As Evelyn scribbled ideas, Ruth sensed the shadows of doubt lingering, but instead of focusing on them, she turned her attention to something deeper. This was not just an art exhibition, it was a bold assertion of her existence. "What if I included a live painting session?" she suggested, voice thick with excitement. "I could narrate my thoughts as I create. It would be raw and real." Evelyn's face lit up. "That's brilliant. It's direct engagement. People will connect with the process, not just the final piece." Ruth's heart swelled with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. Live painting meant bearing not only her finished works but also her vulnerabilities in real time. The unpredictable nature of that endeavor both thrilled and terrified her. Would she be able to articulate her struggles while actively creating? Could she ensure people would only see her strength rather than her insecurities? As they exchanged more ideas, Ruth began to understand that embracing this opportunity was about more than just exposing her art. It involved embracing herself, flaws and all. Breaking through the walls built from years of self-doubt required courage she had barely begun to tap into. "Okay," she said, her voice firm and resolute, "let us make this happen." By committing to this showcase, Ruth felt she was pushing against her insecurities, wielding her art as both shield and sword. Instinctively, she understood that vulnerability was not a weakness, it was a strength that could ignite inspiration in others. This was her moment to reclaim her narrative and channel her passions into something transformative. With the cafe around them fading into the background, Ruth's mind buzzed with new possibilities. Ideas for her artwork began to whirl, cascading like a melodic stream, enriching each creative impulse. Maybe the showcase would not cure her fears, but it could serve as a powerful platform for self-discovery, a profound unveiling of transformation. Suddenly, a message notification on her phone disrupted her reverie. It was a reminder of the deadline to secure the exhibition space. Her heart raced anew, ushering in the weight of urgency. She looked at Evelyn, who wore a grin of camaraderie as if to say they were in this together, a pairing that might just shatter the glass walls Ruth had so carefully constructed. "Let us do this," Ruth confirmed, feeling the gravity of her commitment solidify. But deep inside, another question began to gnaw at her: who among her past would show up to support this attempt at expression? And, would their presence embolden her, or dredge up old wounds? This was only the beginning of a journey that would test her ability to balance vulnerability with strength. As she sunk into the depths of her ambition, she wondered, how would the act of revealing her art ultimately alter her reality? A new horizon beckoned, but the shadows of her past lingered, waiting to meet her at this new intersection of risk and potential. The moment of truth was coming faster than she anticipated, and the stakes only grew higher. As Ruth left the cafe, her pulse quickened with each step away from the familiar confines of her retreat. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over her path, yet a chill ran down her spine. Excitement danced with anxiety in her chest. Each fleeting thought about the exhibition confronted her like an invisible weight, while echoes of self-doubt whispered insidiously. How would she even begin to create that powerful series of pieces? She was determined to encapsulate her journey, yet the deeper she dug into her intent, the more her confidence wavered. In the quiet of her mind, a nagging voice questioned the authenticity of her own narratives. What if her exploration of resilience fell flat? What if her vulnerabilities revealed were ridiculed beneath the harsh light of scrutiny? Removing herself from those gnawing thoughts, Ruth resolved to turn them into fuel. She needed to establish a routine, an unwavering structure that upheld her creative intentions. Every morning, she would rise to paint, dedicate hours to the stories waiting to shed their silence on canvas. This practice would also serve as her shield against the inevitable doubts. But could she sustain that commitment? Ruth established a makeshift studio in her living room, clearing the space to create a reflection of her chaotic yet beautiful evolution. The first stroke felt foreign, almost defiant against the blank white canvas that dared her to create. The connection to her emotions, once vivid, seemed to dissolve away under the weight of expectation. Day after day, she wrestled with shapes and colors, sometimes painting furiously, sometimes faltering under the heaviness of recollection. Ruth focused on embracing the chaos rather than mastering it. She would articulate every brushstroke, every emotion, narrating her process aloud, reinforcing that she was reclaiming the power of her story. With Evelyn as support, the logistical aspects of the exhibition morphed into manageable tasks. The two brainstormed ideas to attract an audience, creating a social media buzz around Ruth's work. Each time she pushed past her limitations to promote, she felt a wave of vulnerability surge forth, yet, paradoxically, a grounded sense of strength accompanied it. Engaging with potential viewers became a boundary-pushing exercise, testing her insistence on authenticity. Yet, as the exhibition date loomed closer, uncertainty dug deeper into her core. She recalled past criticisms that stung, whispers marked by judgment and misunderstanding. Would her family attend? Each time she thought of the possibility, sharp anxiety gripped her heart. It would be daunting to face those who had overlooked her worth. During one revealing painting session, as colors mixed on her palette, an insistent thought struck her. What if she confronted those fears head-on? A specific family member, her estranged sister, had been the source of significant doubt throughout her life. Ruth had long sought her approval, only to end up plagued by comparisons. A sense of clarity washed over her. Perhaps their relationship could be the catalyst for closure, an acknowledgement of her growth. Drawing on that realization, Ruth created a piece that depicted two figures standing apart, a representation of both separation and potential reunion. Each detail injected with history, pain, and the flickering hope of understanding. This piece was no longer just art, it became her mission to transcend past grievances and find a sense of resolution. The night before the exhibition felt electric with possibility. Ruth stood before her collection, weighing the implications of revealing these truths. Would vulnerability breed connection, or amplify her fears? As she switched off the light, darkness enveloped the room. The sound of her heartbeat filled her ears, the tension of her upcoming vulnerability palpable. Tomorrow would mark not just an exhibition of her art, but a confrontation with everything that had kept her from truly living. On the precipice of this emotional showcase, Ruth questioned, would she find healing in her self-exposition, or would it leave her bare to the judgment she so feared? Tomorrow would not only be a show, it would be a reckoning. What awaited her on the other side of that threshold? Ruth stepped into the gallery the next day, her heart pounding a rhythm of anticipation and trepidation. The walls stood as silent witnesses to her journey, each painting shimmering with hues of her soul's depth. Her palms felt clammy, and as she caught sight of her collection, she realized everything she had poured into these canvases wasn't just a display of art, they were her testament to resilience, to defiance against the shadows that had loomed over her for far too long. Previously, her self-doubt whispered harsh criticisms, but today, she stood as both creator and curator, ready to embrace whatever unfolded. Her series of works depicted stages of her transformation from the darkness of grief and solitude to the vivid embrace of joy and creation. The overwhelming scent of oil paint hung in the air, mingling with the crispness of possibility. Ruth felt the weight of expectancy settle like a warm, supportive blanket on her shoulders. With each guest that entered, her nervousness morphed into a sense of belonging. Conversations burgeoned around her, laughter floated beside the music, and for the first time, she felt the rich tapestry of community woven around her, no longer a silent specter on the outskirts, but a vibrant participant in this shared space. When the moment came for her to address the crowd, a whirl of uncertainty once again threatened to encroach upon her newfound confidence. Yet, with a deep breath, Ruth stepped up to the microphone, her heart aligned with a fierce resolve. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steadying as it resonated throughout the gallery. "This exhibition embodies my journey of reclaiming my identity after years of silence." As she shared her story, she did not shy away from her vulnerabilities. Instead, she confronted them, inviting listeners to connect with their own narratives, evoking sparkling eyes and nodding heads in a silent chorus of understanding. "Through art, I found my voice, and each stroke on the canvas reflected not just my turmoil but the beauty of healing." With every word, she demonstrated profound growth, embracing the weight of her past with confidence that eclipsed self-doubt. The positive energy surged, and when her eyes locked onto familiar faces, friends, her granddaughter Sarah, and even that estranged sister, an exhilarating clarity overcame her. Yes, she felt raw, but she also felt powerful. After her heartfelt speech and an outpouring of support, the evening took a thrilling turn as visitors began to engage in discussions about their emotional responses to her work. Some shared their stories of doubt and loss, others whispered encouragement. The gallery buzzed with empathy and connection as her art transcended its physical space and became a conduit for shared experiences. By the end of the night, the once nervous spirit of Ruth had shifted into something profound and grounding. She watched her pieces, so carefully crafted, elicit emotions and reflections from others. Feeling that recognition seep into her bones, she claimed the title of artist not only in the professional realm but in the depths of her heart. As people filtered out of the gallery, one last presence approached her. Evelyn stood before her, a soft respect splashed across her features. "You have achieved something extraordinary, Ruth," she said, sincerity filling her voice. "You've claimed your space, and in doing so, you've rekindled your passion for art in a way that inspires many." Their eyes locked, and for the first time, Ruth felt a wave of acceptance ripple through her, a warmth where previously resided doubt. "Thank you for pushing me," Ruth said, "your belief in my potential ignited my own." Ruth left the gallery that night feeling lighter than air, a woman transformed, one who had stepped out of the shadows of her former life and into the vibrant illumination of her truth. She had not only showcased her art but had built a bridge back to herself, learned to confront her fears head-on, and developed an unwavering appreciation for her own narrative. This was her achievement. Not merely the recognition from others but the fulfillment of becoming who she was always meant to be. The fire of ambition churned within her, inviting the future with open arms. The next step was to continue nurturing her passion, to keep creating and inviting others to join her on this journey of artistic expression. Before she settled into bed that night, a thought crystallized in her heart. She had conquered her deepest fears, recognized not just her artistry, but her worth as an individual. And in doing so, she vowed to herself she would always embrace the journey ahead, honoring the complexities of her evolution. So, to you witnessing this moment, if Ruth's journey of transformation sparked something within you, if it resonated on a deeper level, now is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because your engagement truly elevates personal narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Ruth's ending. What did you think of her transformation? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because you need to inspire others to embrace their own journeys of growth. Don't wait even one more second to share this. Be the force that spreads transformation.